I will give y'all a quick little update about Breaking the Glass and who we are. So again, thank you all for joining us today. I know it's the end of the day, so I appreciate you all logging in with us again. I know lots of us have already been talking about Zoom fatigue, so thank you for being strong and logging on at the end of the day. My name is Elizabeth Lamb, and I'm the Partnerships Manager for Breaking the Glass. We're so excited to begin today's discussion. Originally, it was going to happen back in March, and then the world went upside down, so we're finally having it today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Breaking the Glass, we are a women's career development and D&I initiative founded by technical recruiters from Computer Futures. What started as a grassroots organization in Austin, Texas, is now a national program that partners with organizations like NASA, Charles Schwab, Walmart, Intel, Women in Cable Tech. We develop personalized programming based on organizations' DEI goals. So if you run an employee resource group or you're just interested in bringing more programming like this to your organization, I'll be sending out my contact information. And as we continue on with the panel, if you have any questions, we do have the Q&A feature at the bottom. You can chat that in, and so at the end, our moderator, Jewel, will be fielding those questions to the panelists. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to kick us over to Jewel and disappear for the next few minutes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Elizabeth. First, I have to give a huge shout out and kudos to Elizabeth, because ever since this pandemic hit, like, she's been working like a machine, cranking out all these virtual events and making everything so easy on the people who are a part of it. So I wish I could hear people like clapping or something, but huge shout out to Elizabeth. Little silent clap.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And, you know, thanks everyone else for being here who I'm seeing logging in, all these participants. It's great to see some new names and also some old friends. My name is Schaevitz, for those of you who don't know me. I'm going to be the moderator for the panel this afternoon. And so I do work at Computer Futures, been here for the last 4 years. I'm one of the Salesforce Alliance managers, so managing our partnership with Salesforce.com. And I also sit on the board for Breaking the Glass and just help oversee the events that we put on specifically in our New York office. And again, you know, Elizabeth mentioned it, we were supposed to host this event in March, but I just want to say a special shout out to New York City and, you know, to everyone from the New York area. I know that, you know, we and that city have been so heavily impacted by the pandemic. And, you know, I know just personally, like, I haven't seen so many friends and family in such a long time. And, you know, I know other people are the same. So, you know, I miss everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. You know, this panel was actually supposed to be in our New York City office. So actually all of the panelists who are here with us today are from the New York area. We were just talking a little bit about, you know, where we've relocated and things like that. But so it's kind of nice to feel that sort of local touch, even though, you know, we're dialing in from far and wide. So as Elizabeth mentioned, you know, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A little chat box on the bottom. That will probably be the easiest way to make sure that we get to them. And thanks so much for doing that. And so before I introduce the topic of creating confidence and, you know, the talking points further, I first just want to give my panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'll just start off, you know, with Priyanka. Why don't you, start off the intros?
Sure. Hi, I'm Priyanka, Director of Database Strategy at ASPCA, one of the leading animal welfare organizations. I've been working with nonprofit for the past 15, 16 years in different capacity, mostly data impact evaluation and technology, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg, do you want to
Sure.
do your intro?
Yeah. Meg Hewitt, nice to meet everybody. Thanks for hopping on. I'm a RVP at Salesforce, which many people have heard of. And yeah, a little bit about me. I've been at Salesforce for 2.5 years. Prior to that was running other sales teams throughout New York City and in DC. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Meg.
You're here too.
So my name's Drew Evans. I'm a senior director here at Computer Futures, which is a tech staffing firm covering the East Coast and the Midwest. Again, I've been there for 10 years, born and raised in upstate New York, and have been in Manhattan for a while.
Thanks, Drew. Doug?
Hey, Doug Nieders. I'm a managing director at Credit Suisse. I'm the chief administrative officer for the Global Markets Division. I'm highly involved in diversity and inclusion work at Credit Suisse, as well as my daytime job. And this coming August, I will have been at Credit Suisse 30 years.
Wow.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for those intros. And, just to all of our participants and people listening, it's clear that we have a really great panel of, people who I honestly think are pretty confident leaders. Some I've known for a very long time, some are more recent. But I think what's really great about this panel in general is just that everyone's coming from a different industry. Meg, as she said, from Salesforce, coming from high tech, Priyanka from the nonprofit space, Doug from financial services, and then Drew and myself from the employment industry. Really just speaking to that, we're not focusing on necessarily one industry. This is really, for everyone, we hope. I'm really grateful for everyone's willingness to take part in this conversation on confidence, because it's not an easy topic, and it's definitely not a small topic. Confidence is a loaded word. There's so much to unpack. And, especially in light of 2020, in the middle of a pandemic that has really shifted the way that we live and the way that we work. Even in the recent weeks with the amplified call for racial justice across the globe, in some ways, at least for me, it feels like as a society, we're really starting from scratch. It's been a very introspective time. And, even the workplace itself is evolving. And so in response to the pandemic, and, it seems relevant to acknowledge the new challenges that are impacting our daily confidence. Today we're going to focus on basically three main areas to keep things, organized, and also to really make sure that we can flesh out the points that we're particularly interested in. So we're going to cover why it is important to be confident when building your career, to understand the confidence gap theory and potentially issues with that and ways to bridge that gap. And finally, how being an ally requires confidence and can also make others more confident. So without much further ado, I'll sort of kick it off with the first area about the importance of building confidence in your career. So Drew, just to sort of break some ice, started off with you. I want to ask, what is something you were naturally not confident about? And why did you think building confidence in that area was important to you?
Sure. I think the nature of my job, it's kind of an odd answer, but for me, just being in a room full of strangers that potentially know each other always put me in this like weird place where like I didn't know what to say. That feeling where everyone's talking about something and you're just kind of nodding your head. And in sales, obviously all day I'm in rooms with people, and right now I'm in a virtual room with people that I barely know. So I think especially early in my career, I was very unconfident in that. The second part was why it was important. I knew it was important early on just because of the nature of my role, but I think it hit me, it was almost an epiphany with a really big meeting that I had one time. So it was with a guy that was literally a billionaire. He owned his own hedge fund. And I remember going into the meeting extremely nervous. And I remember trying to build commonality. I was like, I got nothing in common with this guy. And I asked him what he was doing. And I expected some like Great Gatsby party he was going to. And he was watching Dancing with the Stars, the finale. And it like immediately, it made me laugh, but also it just made me realize that like everyone's skin and bones, and no matter where you are in society, everyone, has some sort of commonality and is regular. So that really grounded me and made me a lot less nervous going into meetings.
That's interesting, just because for as long as I've known you, like Drew's been my boss for 4 years, you would never think that that's something that he wasn't naturally comfortable with. And I'm sure Meg in sales, you probably feel like similar, like when did I begin, this journey of confidence? But no, and Priyanka, I kind of want to turn it over to you and ask you the same question. What's something that you didn't start out as being confident in and then built that up?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked me this question because, I'm talking here with all these people, and public speaking was my area where I was not at all confident. So it's been a long journey. I remember all my school life, my college. I'm the one who's writing stuff that people can go on stage and talk about, and being in the background and doing everything, but not going there and talking. And I guess that was something I was accepted, like, oh, it's now I'm fine throughout the college, throughout my school years. I mean, if my people from a school scene, they were like, oh, Priyanka talking, but that's how it was. But when I started working, I realized in managing people, I realized that I really have to be an advocate for myself, for my team, for my organization. And that really kind of compelled me to like more, taking more step ahead and going out there. And and here I am.
Yeah, no, here you are. And even just a few conversations we've had leading up to this panel, like I've had some amazing chats with you. And so that's, again, just like an interesting thing that, that strength that you have so much right now, you might have not felt that way when you first started. And just the last perspective, Doug, I want to lob the question over to you as well. What was an area you didn't feel confident in that now, you developed that skill?
Yeah, I think when I first moved to New York, I was in theater. I was a singer dancer. I did that for about 10 years. And as a gay man in theater, people kind of accept you as you are. It's much more accepting. So then think about transitioning and working on a trading desk on Wall Street. Really, really unnerving, not sure how to approach myself and all of these people that I didn't know. And it was really a very tough decision to say, I bring my whole self to the job every day. I hide nothing from these people. And if they accept me, that's great. If they don't, it's really not my problem. I'm hired to do a job, and I need to bring myself every day to do that job and not use any of my energy to hide any part of who I am. I happen to be one of the most fortunate people in the world that in my 30-year career, not once have I ever faced any sort of discrimination against me for being gay on Wall Street at this firm. And I'm very, very happy with that.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I want to do like a little snaps, That's amazing. And I'm sure, we're going to unpack that as we move forward in the conversation. And thank you so much for sharing everyone, a slightly maybe vulnerable area for you guys. And that was really why I wanted to ask that question, share a vulnerable side of everyone, as we kind of open up this conversation. And also to really, share with everyone who's listening that, confidence is not something you're born with, although it might seem like it in some people. It's really something that we create for ourselves and for others. So now, Meg, I want to turn it to you. And, when we were chatting as well, I read up as many articles as I could before today, like about confidence. I didn't really know what to talk about or who was saying what about it before. And one of the statements that I saw sort of repeated again and again was, it's just as important to be confident as it is to have confidence in order to create your success. And so I'm curious how true that you have found that personally in your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, of course, depends on the job, but competence, you're not getting hired necessarily for the things that you know about what the company does. It's your confidence that gets you in the door. And so there's those things that you kind of can and cannot teach. And you can slowly teach confidence, but there's a way that you have to have an aspect of it to get in the door. And you can be taught about the software, but without that confidence backing you, you're not ever going to be able to have the competence, because you're going to have too much self-doubt, and you're going to get in your own way of having the competence that you really need to be really successful in your life and your career. So it's pushing back what you feel like you don't know in terms of competence, reach for the confidence, really dive in there, and everything else falls into place a lot more easily.
I really like that answer, because there's something about it that seems almost like a formula in terms of like how to access that confidence in a way. it's like, you know, just push back the fears about lacking the confidence. Know that that's there for you. Like if A equals X plus C, you know, fill in, just do it type of thing.
Right.
I love that. That's really valuable. And also, Meg, I know that you had spoken on a panel recently about managing up and how best to communicate to people at different levels within an organization. And we all know that we have colleagues, or we ourselves might speak to someone who's very senior in the organization versus a colleague versus someone who might just be starting out. So Doug, actually, I'm gonna ask you just off of that, you know, let's say that you're trying to find your voice within your organization. Do you feel that we should be careful about the way that we communicate to different players within our organization?
I don't know if I use the word careful. I think you have to be strategic about it, right? So make sure that you know the players, make sure that you know how the players can help, or know your audience of who you're talking to and how you're supposed to deliver to them. And also, I think in doing so, you cannot be afraid to make mistakes. It's called being human. And the only way you move forward is to make those mistakes, but then make it a learning or a teaching moment for yourself or for others. But then as you approach people, look, I think if you in your mind put someone on a pedestal, you're going to treat that person or act differently with that person. And at the end of the day, if you're delivering something to them, you can't do that. You have to have a more strategic approach rather than a careful, I'm going to make a mistake, or this person is better than me or knows more than I am. And never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. To add to that point, Doug, I mean, I think a big thing that you want to remember is everybody communicates a bit differently. Everybody needs to be communicated with a bit differently. So the managing up piece, well, I'll table that for a second and just say, in sales conversations with customers, your confidence comes out when you are direct and concise. Do not over-explain yourself. You get yourself in this corner where you're backed in, and you actually sound with so much less confidence if you keep going and don't just stop talking like I should do now. But the piece about managing up versus managing down, I think, of course, in managing up, you may not have as much time to figure out how that person likes to be communicated to. So you may be a little more brief initially, but everybody wants to have that everybody is open to having that conversation. And as a leader, you have to understand how your people work, what works well for them, and continue to go back to that. Say, how has this relationship been going for you so far? What's working well? What's not? How do we communicate? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And to not be afraid to have those gut checks. Again, they're going to be a lot more confident in being open and honest with you, and relationships just thrive in that environment.
No, that's great to hear from both of you. And, you know, just to sort of comment on what Doug was saying too, you know, if you put someone on a pedestal, like that's a limiting belief in some ways. Like it's a bias that you're kind of creating in your head that, and as Meg sort of echoed, it's going to hold you back from the service that you can ultimately provide. I really like that. I like to think about how if you put someone on a pedestal, if you're worried about talking to someone, that could be a limiting belief. And then also, Meg, as you said, thinking about the relationships uniquely and individually, like checking in with your gut. You know, I'm sort of just like absorbing things and just kind of echoing what you're saying. And this is actually really great takeaways. And so, you know, Priyanka, I'm going to turn it to you. And, you know, before this conversation, we were talking a bit about, you know, what it means for you to be an immigrant in the workplace, and, you know, how so much of your experience in the United States is figuring out how to practice confidence in an entirely new culture. And so with that in mind, I'm curious where you find validation in the workplace, or where have you throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, if I look back, I've been in the United States now 15 years, came 15 years back. I guess a lot of confidence I'll not say issue or the problem that you most encountered is during when you're trying to get in, trying to get a job, you know, and it's a difficult process for anybody. But even when you are immigrant and when you are in a new culture, you have a different, you know, upbringing, thought process, and way you act and not act. And then when you're trying to get a job or get into workforce, I guess it plays a lot on your confidence because you're self-doubting yourself all the time, you know, questioning yourself all the time. And maybe it's maybe not normal for somebody. It's like, oh, did I do the right resume? Did I talk properly? Is it the way they, you know, my the words that I use is right, you know, I'm using, am I dressed up properly? Is it the way people dress up here for interviews? I've been engaged with organizations who specifically work for immigrants and make them, you know, give them training and advice on how to break in the job market. And I see this across everywhere. I mean, from as simple as a resume format to something as simple as, you know, like is my attire appropriate or not, you know? And I guess in that time when failure happens or it's a struggle, it's very hard on your confidence because you're so self-doubting and it's not because, you know, your struggle is more real, it's more double then. But once you break in, I think your works matter and how you do your work and how you project yourself. I think it's as normal as anybody, be it immigrant or not an immigrant. And I've been very fortunate. And I think for my entire career here, I work with organizations where people have valued diversity and inclusion. And I've been very fortunate. I've never felt that at the workplace, I've been treated differently because I'm an immigrant. You know, I've been valued for what I bring to the table. And so I guess my personal experience has been much more struggle to get in. But once I'm in, I think it's more validation of my, you know, talent and my work. And I have worked with amazing group of females who have validated, you know, been a source of validation throughout my career. And I think it's once you cross that initial hurdle of getting in, it's not that, it's same, you are on the same page as anybody else. But I guess my experiences have been because I've been very fortunate to work with organizations who have, you know, who really value diversity and inclusion and never made me feel that, oh, you know, as an immigrant, there's an issue or something. So maybe, you know, other people might have encountered that, but personally, at least I have not come across anything like that in 15 years here.
Well, that makes me so happy to hear, for one, and same, you know, both you and Doug, I hear that you guys haven't faced any type of discrimination in terms of your personal, like, identity, and so maybe New York is doing something right, or some organizations, you know, are on the right track. And, you know, what I actually was really interested in what you were saying, Priyanka, is kind of, you know, you mentioned, like, applying for the job or, like, getting in the door is probably where the self-doubt might come across, or, you know, that sort of that challenging aspect. And then it was interesting too, because Meg earlier had said, you know, you need confidence, like that's what you need just to get in the door, right? So I'm kind of just interested to like think about that for a second in terms of like, Priyanka, even your experience, like would you say that it was that push of confidence that really is able to get you over the line for that job, or, you know, how did you get through that difficult time or those difficult application processes?
Yeah, I think that's where your confidence plays in, because I don't think so I ever doubted myself. You know, I think what I doubted more was, am I doing the right way or not? You know, I mean, I had the confidence on my abilities, but the doubting part was more about, am I going through the right way? Am I doing the right things that needs to be done? And how should I preparing myself in some areas where it's what I'm lacking, you know, and a lot of self-awareness, a lot of not giving up. Because I know it's going to happen eventually, just that I have to keep trying. So the confidence was there in my abilities, but I guess I used to self-doubt in terms of how I'm approaching it. You know, am I doing the right thing? And I'll confess, I mean, sometimes you have moments where you're like, you doubt yourself for a minute. You're like, oh, you know, maybe it's not, I can't do this, you know. It's an entirely new place. I'm here with a kid and trying to do and get all this thing done. Maybe it's not. I mean, I have those moments, that to be very frank, I mean, it happens. But eventually, I guess I've been lucky to have people who had faith in me, you know, and who had much more, I'll say more faith in me than I had in myself. And that actually really helped at workplace, in personal life. I've been lucky that way.
No, thank you for sharing that experience. And I actually think that's a pretty good segue into sort of like the next topic that I wanted to discuss with you all. And, you know, Priyanka, what it really felt like is, you know, this was a very personal experience for you, but you also had community, or you had people that were supporting you. And it's true, you know, like I feel like developing confidence, or, you know, needing to be confident can feel like it boils down to something so individual and so personal. But, you know, how to be confident at work is not only up to you individually. There are definitely silent factors, you know, surrounding gender, race, and other socioeconomic variables that impact what it means to be a confident person at work. You know, for one thing, like the more reading I've been doing on confidence, you know, I've been learning a lot about the confidence gap. And, you know, for those who are new to this topic, the confidence gap is basically defined as a theory derived from evidence showing that women are less self-assured than men. It also points to the statistic that proves that even when women are as confident as men, they are not seen as impactful in the same way men are. And unfortunately, can sometimes even be considered like quote unquote annoying, right? Like we all know this stereotype, and that is basically defined as the confidence gap theory. And, you know, sort of what I want to talk about is kind of the issues with this theory, and also how to bridge this gap. You know, for one thing, you know, as I was starting to read about the confidence gap, you know, you see so much about this is how men are confident, and this is how women are confident, and this is men's confidence compared to women's confidence. And, you know, especially with it being Pride Month, and, you know, wanting to celebrate all of those people who are part of the LGBTQIA community, you know, you have to take note that this language is binary and a bit exclusive. So Meg, this is a big question, but I definitely think you can softball this one. But, you know, how do you feel that language around confidence can be more inclusive?
Yeah. Well, just kind of before I answer that question, I think it's just this confidence gap and just my thoughts about it. I mean, people can think that that's the case. Absolutely. In my mind, and again, this is personal opinion here, is so much of what I think goes into this is like so many of those factors that we can't really control. It's like your upbringing, it's patterns that start to come out in our lives that you don't have to be a man, a woman of any gender or race. It's so much to do with the environment that affects the way we are, the way we receive things, the way we exude confidence. And I think that is so much more a good description or understanding as to what that looks like. So yeah, I definitely do disagree. And then just the language around it. I mean, I think when you think about hiring, and we've been talking a lot about this at Salesforce recently, is just you have to go back to characteristics. Right? You have to go back to a commonality and a common thread that doesn't look at race or gender. And it's not that those things aren't noticed, because we are all human, but you have to get your mind speaking in any sort of biased way. I mean, being a strong female woman, I absolutely have been pegged as aggressive, or I don't even want to say it, but a bitch, or, you know, all the things that kind of you get told as a confident woman or get projected on you. So I think the biggest thing, like, don't be afraid to push back, get to know people deeply, understand who they are, how they work, and you'll have a lot more of an understanding of how to communicate well and help bring out their confidence that could just be hiding somewhere.
No, that was extremely well said. And I like what you've sort of opened up here, like this topic of the environment, and there's so many broader factors that we all shared that we could be potentially focusing on. But Doug, I'll let you kind of piggyback off of that, and just curious to hear what else you think we can do to be making the conversation around confidence more inclusive.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was watching there's a YouTube video with Matthew McConaughey interviewing one of the football players. I think it's called Conversation with a Black Man. And he made a great analogy about the way Black people are treated, but I think it goes further than that. And he talks about when a boat is on a lake, right? And you see the boat moving and it makes a wake in the water. And long after the boat has disappeared from view, you can still see the ripple effect of the wake on that lake. And I think that's true for a lot of the moments in our lives that help us build confidence or break confidence, right? That the moment when it happens may not affect us, but it continues for years should those moments affect us. There continues to be that ripple effect long in our life. So I think as you become a manager of people or you work on diversity issues, et cetera, I think it's bringing those sorts of moments to the conversation and recognizing them and trying to turn the tide backward and helping people to build confidence by reverse mentoring opportunities, giving people stretch assignments, allowing people to make mistakes and reviewing those mistakes and making those mistakes a learning and teaching moment rather than a punishment or a degrading moment. And you also have to know what motivates people, right? So helping push those levers so that people that you build that confidence within your staff, within your friends, within your family, to know and appreciate the moments that will last for a long time in building that confidence.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was chatting to a colleague even just before this, kind of like prepping, and, you know, there is something really interesting about this idea of the moment and all of this, you know, like so much of what we experience as like internalized sexism or racism or whatever it is happens in such a moment where it's like, how can we bring all this thoughtful, you know, maybe it's like mentoring up or stretching your mind, like how do we apply that in the moment when, you know, all we have is like our own whatever. So it's just like an interesting thing to think about. And, you know, continuing on kind of this demystifying the confidence gap, you know, Meg and I are obviously anti, I'm sure everyone else will get on this page, but Drew, I was reading this quote by this professor, Jesse L. Smith at the University of Colorado. And Professor Smith says that the biggest problem with the confidence gap theory is that it's troubling because it suggests that something is wrong with women and that we need to fix them and have them act more like men. And so Professor Smith is saying that this misplaces the responsibility and the burden. And so, Drew, again, I'm sorry for all these hard-hitting questions, but genuinely, like, what can you do to take some of this burden off of the women who we work with?
Give me the hard questions. A PhD asked that. It's interesting, and I think not to take this too much into a tangent, but this can kind of extend into race. I read this book by Trevor Noah. It's called Born a Crime. Really good book. Everyone should read it. He's mixed race, so am I, so I found it interesting. And he grew up in South Africa as a mixed race person, and he found he was accepted when he acted like whatever race it was, right? So he fit in with the black kids when he acted more black. He fit in with the white kids when he acted more white. And I think it extends to gender, which we're talking about. Like we talked about, the women that act like men seem to make it further in business, or at least that's the connotation. And I think that's very backwards, right? I think if women just try and be more like men, then it creates kind of this homogenous cult almost, right, at the top. And I think that's really dangerous. And I think as a manager that manages females, right, I think I need to work to people's strengths, right? It's not creating a mini me or creating people that I've seen successful. It's understanding this woman or this female is strong because of these reasons. Why don't we create a role or set her day and design her role in a structure that works towards her strengths? Because I think people naturally have more confidence when they're talking about something that they're good at, right? we'll rewind 30 years. Doug probably was very confident talking about dance or singing when he was, 21 years old, but he might not have been confident talking about something else, right? And he learned to do that. But when someone is good at something and you put them in a role that they're good at, they're just naturally going to be confident, right? To put it on the table, we created a role for Jewel based on her strengths. And not patting myself on the back, but she has flown because we put her in this type of role where she was good, and you can see the confidence building as she gets better with the job. So to boil that down to one thing, I think it's just creating roles where people can utilize their strengths.
Awesome. No, thank you. And obviously, yeah, that has paid off in great ways for myself. Yeah, and I have a last question I want to ask Priyanka, but does anyone else want to build off of that in terms of how to take any burden off of women? Like, even if Priyanka or Meg want to sort of pipe in, but no, if not, I can just move on to this. And so, again, this is kind of building off of a conversation that Priyanka and I had before the call. But Priyanka has shared that she's a mother, she's a parent. And so, of course, in regards to the pandemic, there's sort of been an interesting parental sort of shift, right? In some ways, both parents are now forced to be more hands-on with childcare and with, honestly, household activities. So I guess I'm curious, like, do you think that there's potential as well for new ways to level the playing field between men and women at work now that we are working in a much more virtual setting?
I think, first of all, I guess for majority of mothers out there, they're overwhelmed right now. It's just because, you have to, even though you say your partner is also working from home, it's still the women doing majority of the work. That's how our social norm is. I mean, to give you, the way I look at it is, it's always like, basically the way it should be that both of us are able to work because somebody else is able to take care of a child during the time, be it at school or a daycare or aftercare or whatever it is. But we always talk about that, women are able to work because there's childcare facility or no kids can go to school. So it's always women. I never see ever being mentioned, when you talk about women in workforce, it's like, oh, let's create situation for women to come back to work. Let's make sure they have childcare. So it's always women. We never talk in terms that both of us are able to work, like both husband and wife, we're able to work because somebody else can take care of the child. And I think that's what's come into forefront right now, where both of them at work and you're like, who is going to take the hit? I have a meeting, are you going to take care of the kids so that you can do it, or how it's going to work around? Or is it like women still doing flexible job where they're like getting up early, making sure lunch is ready and then attend the meeting and then take a break to take care of the kids and then cook dinner, and they're going around the clock, where the partner is maybe not able to support that way. So I guess that's the other point. At the same time, is for some men, the wife are on working on critical job, maybe doctors and nurses in hospital, and they are at home for the first time having complete responsibility of childcare, and that's another situation that we see. And I was pretty I was in one of my DI meetings recently, and one of the colleagues, he said, we are talking about all the biases that's been, out there right now. And he said one of the biases he thinks he's facing is being a man. He thinks it's pretty normal for women to have the flexibility of kids watching, coming into a meeting, or them saying that they need a break because they have to feed the child or they can't work, during this hour. But being a man, he's not given that flexibility. People don't take that normally, and which I was really surprised. But at the same time, I think for some men, that's another problem that they are facing. So we see different spectrum right now. And I think because of this pandemic, I hope we have a big change that comes in our social process or thinking, and recognizing the fact that it's both the gender job, not just one parent. It's not just women. And I guess it's happening in a way where you see company, realizing that flexible schedule or childcare is for men too. The men employees also need that time and flexibility as compared to women as well. So that's happening, but I hope it's sustained and it continues.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that actually shed really interesting light on kind of what, we were discussing earlier and what sort of Meg pointed out with the environment and the fact that now we're all forced into this kind of like similar environment. And as you said, it's being brought to the forefront of like, do men also need flexible working? It's kind of bringing into question all of these norms. And it kind of just directly speaks to maybe we should be thinking more about the environment and less about those other factors. And just, to move on to sort of the last section of this panel. What I have honestly been the most excited to chat about is really that, to be an ally, it takes confidence. And also when you are an ally, you can create confidence in someone else or in others. And so I want to start with Doug. Again, I only actually met Doug a few weeks ago, so fortunately, but, I was actually just like blown away when we met. And, largely because I found out, one, like you're super senior at Credit Suisse and, you also backed the LGBTQ community and the Black community for your employees at Credit Suisse. And to me, like, just to be totally frank and not like, this isn't like storybookish, but I was like, oh my God, like, that's amazing. Like, I feel like I should be more excited to be like LGBTQ because like he backs me and like he backs us. And seriously, like, as a white man who's like very successful, for you to back those communities is like a very huge sort of like reflection of who you are, and also just probably makes everyone at Credit Suisse feel like a certain type of way. And I guess I would be curious for you to talk to us about the confidence or the courage it took you to start thinking like an ally, and also the confidence to back those groups at work.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy transition for me. I've run the LGBT network at Credit Suisse going on maybe 10, 11 years. And when I started, it was a very secret society. We had like a mailing list that no one could see who was on the mailing list. We held meetings in a room. We didn't tell people where it was. But interestingly enough, the LGBT network was the first employee network at Credit Suisse. It was actually the first ERG to be formed. And once we formed the network, then the next logical step was allies. We need people within the business, straight, whatever, we need their support, and support in allowing us to bring full self to work, allowing us to be confident in who we are, giving us opportunities to succeed and to grow. And I just was the guy that was the big squawker that wouldn't shut up. So we were able to make a huge effort across the globe, actually, with our ally network. And it's really, an ally is really creating that safe space, creating a space where a person can speak freely, they can learn, they can help you learn. And also, I think the latest part of that is having courageous conversations. That means, not being able to ask difficult questions, not being afraid to ask, how do I do something? How do I approach a subject? Like my boss at one time said, well, what do I call your partner? Do I call him your husband? What do I call him? And I said, we call him Bill. That's what his name is. It's that simple. And so it's creating that space, and maybe not a physical space, but a space where the LGBT community, the Black community, women who are struggling can have a safe space to be who they are and to allow them the opportunity to grow, and not be afraid to ask difficult questions or pose, having a courageous conversation if you don't understand something, not being afraid to ask the questions.
Thank you so much. And those birds chirping, like a perfect little, finalize that comment. And I guess just actually one question just to build off of that. So can you talk a little bit about what it looked like when you were identifying allies and to bring to these groups to sort of represent, and if there were any even just like challenges around that?
I don't think there were challenges. I think that the large majority of folks said, of course, I'll be an ally to that community. The interesting thing is that upper management were probably the first to raise their hands and say, of course, I would be an ally to the community. I would be an ally to LGBT, to the Black professionals, to the Women's Network. And part of the program is that many of our ERGs are actually sponsored by very high-level managers at Credit Suisse. So I think it's a sign when you see an executive or a high-level manager supporting a group, and actually not just supporting, but walking the walk and talking the talk, people tend to step in line and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. If so-and-so can do that, I can do that, and I can make a difference. And I think that's probably the most important part of it, is getting that senior sponsorship and making sure that they are in step with everything that you're trying to do, and other people will follow.
That's a great point, the executive sponsorship. Thank you so much, Doug. And I'm just taking a look at the time. I see we have about like 15 minutes left. So I'm just gonna wrap it up with like a few questions, and then, maybe open it up to Q&A. So Meg, I'll leave you with one of the final questions, but have you ever had an ally at work? And if so, how did that make you feel?
Yeah. Oh, I loved the other question you were going to ask me. No, it's okay. I'll kind of speak to both of them. I just want to say one piece in relation to what Doug said, running a women's network in New York City of young women. And I think just one thing I'll say is that, yes, there are things that happen to women as individuals. And it's not that they don't happen to anyone else. It is, though, nice to be in a community of people that look like you, whatever that look is. That could be across gender, race, class, religion. It doesn't really matter. But it was really important to have at least a group of entry level all the way through to seasoned professionals that are female, and to be able to show, oh, there's this woman who's in a senior position. I can be that. I think that's so important in diversity and inclusion training, is that we have senior people that look like those people earlier on in their career. Yeah, so I'll say that. And then in terms of allies, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you need to find allies, but you need to keep looking back to not being afraid to have a conversation as to what that relationship looks like. Not everybody knows what it means fully to be an ally, and I may need an ally to look and feel a little bit different than Doug does, than Drew does, that you do, Jewel. So I have great relationships with very senior executives at Salesforce, and it's my confidence of not being afraid to go up to them and to have them be my sponsors and my allies. And it's on me to find time on their calendar. They're not thinking about me every day just because they're my ally. I can't have that expectation. It's on me to make sure that they think well about me. I'll stop there.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. And I totally agree, like, I can be that. I love the way that you phrase that, and it is important. And sometimes I guess when you're working in an organization, it's like, who can you spot that's like someone that you can strive to be? And so just a last question, and again, I'm sorry, panel, because I know we had a few questions that we mapped out, but I just want to make sure that we get to the Q&A. So, I guess, Doug, I'll leave it with you. We were talking about this phrase, fake it until you make it. We hear that a lot in terms of like building confidence. I guess just to what extent do you think that we actually can fake it until we make it, and how do you balance sort of that with just like being authentic, whether it's like being super junior or whatever it might be?
Wow, I hate that term. I say you bring 100% of your authentic self to work, to life, every moment that you can, because the energy that you take to hide any part of who you are detracts from that authentic self, and you're wasting that energy for no good purpose. So don't fake it, be yourself and make it. That's what I say.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for your thoughtful answers. And again, I'm sorry that I asked some pretty tough questions, but I think that it will really sort of be a great thing to sort of leave off with, hope to inspire some other combos. I definitely want to open up these Q&A here. I know Elizabeth has kind of been waiting in the wings as well. So I see a question here from Atlanta Brown. So she says, I am a Black woman in a competitive computer science program. I transferred in, and I know that I made it into the major because I was a competitive applicant. Others, however, have made it a point to tell me otherwise. I feel like most people have this point of view, like I was handed where I am now. It brings me doubt and makes me feel like I have to prove myself, which is exhausting. Any advice about what people in this industry think? Do you ever question why your coworkers are in the place they are in? Or is this something I shouldn't really think about? Whoever sort of wants to start, that's a great question. Thank you so much, Atlanta, for submitting that.
I can, the way I look at my workplace, I think your work speaks for yourself, and the fact that you made it and you were there, that's it. I don't think so. You don't need to prove anybody anything or just to self-doubt yourself. You just being there, it's just proof enough,
Yeah. As hard as it is, the one other thing I'd say is that's bias coming out of other people, and it's getting projected on you. And for you to remember that is really important, and for you not to be afraid to say, hey, can I just tell you how this, just actually speak back about it and say, if they're speaking directly to you, and say, hey, what I'm hearing is a lot of bias there, and it's not helpful, and it's not going to help either one of us get anywhere in our lives. So I'd really appreciate you to respect my work and respect what I do. Just be firm on it. And it's easier, much easier said than done, but I'm sticking with the confidence piece here.
Yeah, I think you have to, as Meg said, I guess you have to realize that it's their bias that's projecting, and it's them that require work, not you.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like you can work on your confidence every day, and then you just have to remember that there are a lot of people who aren't as confident out there, and you kind of need to deal with those projections. But that was a great question. Thank you so much. And I see a question from Felice. I apologize if I'm saying anyone's name wrong. And what is the difference between limiting thoughts and being prepared for objections that have occurred often in the job hunting process? It's a great question. Does anyone want to take this one?
So ask that question again.
Yeah, so what is the difference between limiting thoughts? So I guess sort of what we were talking about before, where it's like, don't think about their bias. You don't want to limit yourself, go in as confidently as you can. And what is the difference between that and then also just being prepared for objections that have occurred often when hunting for jobs?
So I think everyone has limited beliefs in general, right? No matter what, even the most confident people in the world have some level inside them of insecurity and whatnot. And I think one can lead to the other, right? Being overly prepared, all that does is make you more confident in the material, and you're going to come across that much more confident. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with understanding what objections would be and over preparing it, because exactly like I talked before, when you're confident in subject material, you just naturally are better, right? You perform better when you really know what you're talking about. Even back to like when we were in middle school, right? Like if you really knew a subject, you didn't really care that much about the presentation because it was just you talking about something that you knew. So I think over preparedness, if anything, will just help confidence come across.
I think that was great. I don't know if anyone else have anything to add there before we move on to the next question, or good?
Yeah.
So it looks like we have one final question, unless anyone else has anything else to submit, and we're kind of like on this perfect timing, so it's so nice. But Akanksha Sharma says, greetings to all panelists. Firstly, I want to thank you for this wonderful session. Thank you so much for listening, Akanksha. I take this opportunity to introduce myself. I am Akanksha, an Indian, currently a student of Master of Management in France. Wow. I have worked as a teacher for 4 years before joining a business school. I decided to change career fields from teaching to aspiring corporate role. And at times, I find it difficult to remain confident while interviewing for business internships. Could you please suggest how I can work upon this issue? Thanks. Thank you.
I'd say just like a very tactical and kind of tangible thing to do is there are lots of Toastmaster and different ways to actually practice being in that business situation, because it is new for everyone. I think my first example was I was really nervous because I had just never done it. So I would definitely look for networking groups, because there are a lot, especially, I don't know if you're in New York City or not, but most cities will have groups that are usually free where you can go and actually practice those business type conversations. And then the second piece of advice would be super vulnerable with anyone that you know in the industry and explain what your situation is, why you don't feel confident. And I think you'll be surprised at how helpful people can be. And just building that vulnerability also just builds connections with potential people that could help you in the future.
Yeah, I would say also do your homework and know what the internship involves and what you specifically can bring to the table for that internship, and make sure you focus on that. Focus on your strengths of what you would bring to the table for that specific internship.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is think about the soft skills that, particularly as everybody's interviewing on Zoom, right? Are you having good eye contact? Are you speaking to people by their names? Are you speaking slowly enough that people understand you? Are you helping people stay really engaged with you in what you're speaking about? What's your tonality? There's little nuances that make such a difference in how you present. So record yourself, watch yourself, be critical, and you'll do a much better job over time. It's the only way people get better at presentations, is to know what you're doing.
Yeah, good point.
I couldn't agree more. As someone who does a lot of presentations, I think I do like 90 run-throughs, honestly, before everyone, because it comes down to that rhythm and that flow. And I actually missed a question at the very top. I think it's a great one, so I don't want to make sure that we pass over it, but it says, how do you instill confidence in a competent but insecure employee?
I've got a good one for this one. And it's very simple, but I just think praise and recognition go so far, right? When we talk about ripple effects, like Doug mentioned earlier, it's so easy to tell someone, hey, that sounded great, or hey, you did a really good job. And even it's so easy for you to do, and you don't understand how far it goes for someone. Sometimes you physically see their posture pick up, right? Because they just feel better about themselves. So it's something very simple that you can do, and it goes so much further than you can imagine.
An example of that today with an employee. Simply, I know how she communicates, and I remembered, I was like, she needs some reassurance, right? That she's working in the right direction. She's been doing a great job. And I've just consistently, and she responded back and said, hey, Meg, I just want you to know how much it means when you tell me that I'm taking the steps in the right direction. And it was like, oh, good, right, okay. Simple recognition. Love that.
Yeah, and I think that's more important now than ever, right? As we're all working remotely, it's very important to keep that engagement and make sure that we have all of our direct reports have a sense of belonging, and that we're reaching out constantly, reinforcing good things and good behavior, and making sure that we're staying in contact rather than, once a week meeting or something like that.
And then another thing you can do that's very tactical is in business meetings, everyone knows the feeling when you see someone wanting to say something, but they keep getting cut off and they're like, oh, no, you go. And like actually closing the loop and saying, hey, Priyanka, did you have something to say? Those kind of things will instill a lot of confidence because it allows people to get their thoughts out. And then maybe they'll be more comfortable speaking out the next time.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's actually a really great kind of like tangible action that, you know, maybe people listening on this call can take away is like celebrating each other, your teammates, small wins, you know, celebrating those things and just celebrating yourself too. So it looks like we're about a minute over. I see that, you know, Felice, you have one follow-up question here. It looks like it's kind of related to your job search. So if you want, I'm happy to talk to you about that offline, or Drew can. But no, you know, this was a wonderful panel. I want to just make sure I'm sensitive of everyone's time. So, you know, again, Priyanka, Doug, Meg, Drew, thank you so much for kind of opening up, taking on these tough questions that no one really has the perfect answers to. But I took so many notes personally. Like, I'm really excited about, you know, the lessons that we got from this. So if any of you guys have any final thoughts, please feel free. But other than that, thanks. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing. I know we talked about the confidence, and I just want people to just understand the fact that maybe we categorize and say, oh, Meg is super confident or Priyanka lacks the confidence, but it's not something that's final. It's a it's a lifelong journey, and what you might not be confident right now might be, you know, you can work on it, and you are the best judge about what you need to make you confident. What you're lacking, what you're not lacking is, I guess, it's different for everyone. So there's no a list of things that can make you confident out there. You need to have your own self-awareness to understand what makes you a confident person, you know, and what you're lacking and what you should be working on. So maximize your strength, work on your weakness. And I think in this present situation, the one thing that's really important for us to be mindful is we keep talking about our confidence, but we should also be aware that our acts or actions are building and not breaking other people's confidence. So I think that's one thing that everybody needs to have, self-awareness. That's also super important, you know, and not just when we are focused on building our own confidence. I think that's in present world, especially, we should really be aware of that too. That's my final 2 cents.
I
love that. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so thank you again so much to all our panelists for joining on. The one thing I do miss about in-person events so much is that you don't get a big round of applause afterwards when people wrap up. But, thank you again for joining us. Attendees, I will be sending out a follow-up email with links to get in touch with our panelists. Additionally, with the recording of the webinar, we'll be publishing it on the Breaking the Glass website and all our social media. So if you have someone in your life that you think would enjoy this presentation and wasn't able to make it today, that's great thing about digital is that we can watch it over and over, and I'm finally uploading things to YouTube eventually. So it'll be great. Again, thank you so much to our panelists. I hope you all have a wonderful evening with however you choose to spend the rest of your social distancing evening.
Great job, Elizabeth.
Thanks,
Great
everyone.
job, Jewel.
Thank you. Great time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Perfect.